It was a cold Friday evening when the school gym started filling with laughter, chatter, and the kind of music that made young hearts light. The annual charity dance at Westbridge High had begun, and the decorations shimmered under the soft yellow lights. Balloons floated above, a disco ball turned slowly in the middle, and the air smelled faintly of popcorn and new shoes. In the far corner, a man quietly swept the floor with an old broom. His uniform was faded and his shoes were more tired than his body, but his movements were calm and steady. His name was Ethan Cole, and everyone in the building knew him as Mr. Cole, the janitor. Ethan wasn't supposed to be there that late. Most of the staff had already gone home to enjoy the weekend, but he had volunteered to stay behind to make sure everything ran smoothly. He didn't mind. The extra hours meant a little more money at the end of the week, and that meant groceries, bills, and maybe even a small surprise for his daughter Lila. Ethan was a single father. He didn't talk much about how that happened. People only knew that his wife had passed away some years back, and since then he had been raising Lila on his own. She was 12 now, bright and full of questions. Every night before bed, she would tell him stories she'd read, and he'd listen like she was the most important person in the world, because to him she was. So, when the school principal asked for a volunteer to help clean during the charity event, Ethan didn't hesitate. It wasn't glamorous work, but he was used to that. As long as Lila had what she needed, nothing else mattered. From where he stood, he could see the students dancing awkwardly at first, then loosening up as the night went on. The DJ played songs that were popular, full of beats and energy. Groups of friends posed for pictures, couples danced shyly, and teachers supervised from the sides, pretending not to remember their own teenage years. Ethan smiled as he worked. It reminded him of his own school days, the kind of nights that felt endless and magical. He didn't have those moments anymore, but seeing others enjoy them brought him quiet joy. As he pushed the mop bucket toward the gym's side wall, something caught his eye. Near the bleachers, almost hidden behind a group of chatting girls, sat a small wheelchair. And in it, a young girl who couldn't have been more than 15. She was dressed nicely, a soft pink dress, shiny shoes, and her hair tied back with a ribbon. But her hands were folded tightly in her lap, and her eyes darted between the dance floor and the people laughing. No one seemed to notice her. Ethan paused. For a moment he thought maybe her parents had told her to stay aside, but then he saw her expression. It wasn't boredom. It was longing. She wanted to be out there. She wanted to be part of the night. He felt a tug in his chest. Maybe it was because he knew how it felt to be invisible, to watch joy from a distance. He leaned on the handle of his mop for a moment, unsure what to do. It wasn't really his place to step in. He was just the janitor. No one expected him to talk to the students. Most of them barely looked at him except when they accidentally spilled something. But then the DJ changed the song. The loud beats faded into a slow melody, one of those soft songs that made couples rush to the center of the gym, holding each other close. The lights dimmed and the disco ball scattered silver spots across the floor. Ethan looked back toward the girl. She was still sitting there, alone, her fingers gripping the edge of her chair. Her lips trembled slightly like she was fighting not to cry. Before he could think too much, he found himself walking toward her. His heart thudded nervously in his chest. Maybe this was a bad idea. Maybe she'd think he was being strange. But something stronger than doubt kept his steps steady. When he reached her, she looked up, startled. He gave her a gentle smile, the same one he gave Lila when she was shy about meeting new people. "Hey there," he said softly, keeping his voice kind and respectful. "Mind if I sit here a moment?" She nodded slowly, her big brown eyes watching him curiously. He sat on the edge of the bleachers beside her, keeping a polite distance. "You're missing out on a pretty good dance," he said, glancing at the crowd. She shrugged, her voice quiet. "No one really asked me to dance." Ethan looked at her for a moment. "Well, that's their loss," he said, smiling again. That made her laugh, a small surprise sound that lit up her face for just a second. Then, after a pause, he stood up and extended his hand. "Would you like to?" he asked simply. "Dance, I mean." The girl blinked, unsure she'd heard him right. "You mean with me?" Ethan nodded. "If that's all right." For a few seconds she didn't move. Then shyly she placed her small hand in his. Her fingers were cold and trembling. Ethan didn't rush her. He gently wheeled her toward the dance floor, careful not to draw too much attention. But soon people noticed. The janitor, the man who usually worked quietly in the background, was out there on the dance floor, holding the hands of a girl in a wheelchair. The music played softly, and Ethan moved slowly, guiding her in a gentle rhythm. He didn't care if anyone stared. The only thing that mattered was the smile spreading across her face. She lifted her head, her eyes shining under the light. "I've never danced before," she whispered. "Well," Ethan said with a warm grin, "there's a first time for everything." Around them, whispers started to spread. A few students laughed quietly, but others stopped and watched in silence. Something about the moment was different. It wasn't forced. It was pure. The girl's laughter began to grow louder, freer. Her chair moved in small circles as Ethan guided her hands gently. The song was nearly over, but in that minute, the world seemed to slow down. By the time the final note faded, the entire gym had gone quiet. Then saw a soft clapping. One person. Then another. Within seconds, the room filled with applause. The DJ, unsure what else to do, just smiled and played the next song. Ethan bowed playfully toward the girl, making her laugh again. "Guess we did all right," he said. She beamed. "That was the best minute of my life," he chuckled. "Glad I could help." When he wheeled her back to her spot, he noticed someone standing by the doorway. A woman, tall and elegant, wearing a black dress. She was watching them closely, her hand pressed over her mouth, but Ethan didn't think much of it. Parents often came to watch from a distance. He returned to his work, pretending to focus on sweeping the corners. But inside, something felt lighter. It had been a long time since he'd seen such a genuine smile. The kind that wasn't forced or polite, but full of gratitude and joy. Later that night, after the music faded and students began leaving, Ethan cleaned up the confetti, the spilled drinks, and the laughter that still seemed to hang in the air. The girl had already gone home, but he couldn't stop thinking about the way her eyes had lit up. As he rolled the mop bucket toward the janitor's closet, he thought of Lila. He wondered if someone would be kind to her like that someday, not because they had to, but because they wanted to. He smiled to himself. Maybe kindness wasn't about grand gestures or big words. Maybe it was simply about showing up, about seeing someone others don't see. When the gym was finally empty, he turned off the last light and stood for a moment in the dark, the faint echo of music still whispering in the corners. It had been just another school event, another long night of work. But deep down, Ethan knew it wasn't just that. Something about that small moment, that single dance, felt bigger than he could explain. And somewhere out there, he didn't know that the woman who had been watching them had tears in her eyes and a story of her own that would soon change his life in ways he could never imagine. For now, though he simply gathered his tools, slung his jacket over his shoulder, and stepped out into the cool night air. The stars were faint, but the wind was calm. He thought about how strange life could be, how the smallest decisions sometimes led to the biggest changes. And as he walked home that night, he couldn't help but smile again, remembering the young girl's laughter as the world around them had forgotten everything else for a moment. The next morning, the school hallways were quiet again. The echoes of laughter and music from the night before had faded, leaving behind only bits of confetti clinging to corners and faint scuff marks on the floor. Ethan arrived early, as he always did. He liked the calm before the day began, when the world still felt half asleep. The air was cool, and the smell of cleaning polish mixed with old wood reminded him of simpler times. He placed his coffee on the cart, rolled up his sleeves, and began sweeping the hallway outside the gym. As he worked, a few teachers passed by, greeting him with polite nods. But he noticed something different that morning. A few of them smiled a little more warmly than usual. One even said, "That was kind of you last night, Mr. Cole." Ethan looked up, confused for a moment, then realized what they meant. The dance. The girl, he smiled awkwardly, just wanted to make sure everyone had a good time, he said. But inside he felt a small warmth rise in his chest. Maybe it hadn't gone unnoticed after all. Later that morning, as the students started to fill the halls, Ethan kept his usual quiet rhythm. He fixed a locker door, helped a teacher carry boxes, and changed a light bulb in one of the classrooms. It was an ordinary day, or at least it seemed that way. Around noon, as he was cleaning the stairway, he heard someone call out softly, "Mr. Cole." He turned around and saw the same girl from the dance. She was in her wheelchair again, wearing a neat uniform and holding a small box in her lap. For a moment, he didn't know what to say. "Well, hey there," he said, finally smiling. "Didn't expect to see you today." She rolled a little closer. "I wanted to thank you," she said shyly, "for dancing with me." Ethan wiped his hands on his rag and nodded. "You don't have to thank me. I had a great time," she smiled. "It was the first time I ever danced. My mom couldn't believe it when I told her." Ethan chuckled softly. "Your mom sounds nice." "She is," the girl said. "She works a lot, but she always tries to be at my events. She said she saw us dancing last night." Ethan's eyebrows lifted. "She did?" The girl nodded. "She cried," she said with a small laugh. "She said you were very kind." He didn't know what to say to that. It wasn't often someone thanked him for being kind. Usually people barely noticed him. The girl opened the small box and handed him a cupcake. "I baked this with my mom this morning. She said we should thank you properly." Ethan smiled and accepted it. "That's very thoughtful of you." "Thank you." The girl's eyes shone with excitement. "Can I tell you a secret?" she whispered, leaning in a little. "Sure," he said. "I was scared to go to the dance," she admitted. "I didn't think anyone would want to talk to me. But then you came and it didn't feel so scary anymore." Ethan's heart softened. "You were brave for going," he said kindly. "That's what matters," she nodded, smiling brightly. "I think my mom wants to meet you," she added. "She said she'll come by later." He didn't know how to respond. "Oh, well, tell her she doesn't have to. I was just doing what anyone would do." The girl giggled. "That's what she said too. But I think she still wants to." With that, she waved and rolled away toward her classroom, leaving Ethan standing there with the cupcake in his hand and a mix of surprise and warmth in his chest. The rest of the day passed quietly, but he couldn't stop thinking about what she'd said. Her mom saw them. Her mom cried. He tried to imagine what kind of woman she was. Kind, maybe, or just grateful someone had noticed her daughter. Either way, he didn't expect to meet her. By late afternoon, the sun was low and the hallways had emptied again. Ethan was just finishing up mopping the entryway when the sound of heels clicking against the floor caught his attention. He turned and saw a woman walking toward him. She carried herself with quiet confidence, tall, graceful, dressed in a black coat that looked expensive but simple. Her hair was neatly tied back and her eyes were sharp yet soft at the same time. "Mr. Cole?" she said, stopping a few steps away. He straightened slightly, surprised she knew his name. "Yes, ma'am," he said politely. "Can I help you?" She smiled faintly. "I believe you already have," she said. "I'm Clara Davenport, Sophie's mother." Ethan blinked. Davenport. The name sounded familiar. Then he remembered the school's donor list, the big plaque near the office with Davenport Enterprises engraved near the top. "Oh," he said awkwardly. "I didn't realize." "It's nice to meet you, ma'am." She looked around the empty hallway, then back at him. "Sophie told me about you," she said softly. "And I saw what you did last night. I wanted to thank you in person." Ethan rubbed the back of his neck, embarrassed. "It was nothing, really. I just thought she might like to dance." "It wasn't nothing," Clara said, her voice quiet but firm. "You made her feel seen. That means everything to me." He didn't know what to say. He wasn't used to being thanked by people like her. People who seemed to have everything. He nodded humbly. "She's a wonderful kid," he said. "Smart kind. You've done a good job raising her." For a moment, Clara's expression softened. "Thank you," she said. Then she hesitated before continuing. "It's not always easy. Her condition makes things complicated. Sometimes she feels left out. I do my best, but I can't always protect her from that." Ethan nodded. "I understand," he said quietly. "I've got a daughter, too. It's tough sometimes trying to be everything they need." Clara looked at him curiously. "You're a single parent?" He nodded. "Yeah, been that way for a while. It's just the two of us." There was a pause. Not uncomfortable, just thoughtful. Then she said, "You must be a good father. Sophie doesn't open up easily, but she couldn't stop talking about you." Ethan smiled softly. "She's a special girl. She just needed someone to see her for who she is, not what people think she can't do." Clara's eyes glistened slightly, though she blinked it away. "You're right," she said. "Most people see her chair first. You didn't. He didn't know what else to say. They stood in silence for a moment, the sound of distant voices echoing faintly from another hallway. Finally, Clara spoke again. "I'd like to do something to thank you properly," she said. "That's really not necessary," he replied quickly. "I was just doing what felt right." "I know," she said gently. "But I still want to. Maybe coffee? Tomorrow morning?" Ethan hesitated. He wasn't sure what she meant, and was it a formal thank you or something else? Either way, it felt strange. She was a businesswoman, probably worth more than he'd earn in a lifetime. What would they even talk about? Still, her expression was kind and genuine. "All right," he said finally. "There's a small cafe near the school. Around 9? She smiled. "Perfect." She thanked him once more and left, her heels clicking softly against the floor until the sound disappeared outside the door. Ethan stood there for a long moment, still holding the mop, wondering if any of it had really happened. That night at home, Lila was sitting at the kitchen table doing her homework when Ethan walked in. The small apartment was warm and smelled of tomato soup. "You're home late," she said without looking up. He smiled, hanging up his jacket. "Busy day." She looked up then, studying him. "You look different," she said. "Like you're thinking about something." He laughed quietly. "Maybe I am." He told her about the dance, even about the girl in the wheelchair and how he'd asked her to dance when no one else would. Lila listened intently, her chin resting on her hands. "That's so nice, Dad," she said softly. "I bet that made her really happy." "I think it did," he said. "Her mom even came to see me today." Her eyebrows lifted. "Really? What for?" "To thank me," he said. "She wants to have coffee tomorrow." Lila's eyes widened. "Is she pretty?" Ethan laughed. "That's not the point," she giggled. "Sounds like it might be." He shook his head, smiling. "She's just being kind, that's all." But later that night, as he washed the dishes and glanced at the small calendar pinned to the fridge, he couldn't help thinking about the woman in the black coat, how calm she looked, how her eyes softened when she talked about her daughter. He tried to tell himself it was just coffee, just a polite thank you, nothing more. Yet deep down, something about her presence lingered in his thoughts, not in a romantic way, but in a human way. Like two people who carried different kinds of loneliness had somehow crossed paths at the right time. When he finally turned off the lights and went to bed, the city outside was quiet. He lay there listening to the faint hum of traffic, thinking about the dance floor, the laughter, and the look on the young girl's face when she said it was the best minute of her life. He didn't know it yet, but that single act of kindness, one small choice, was already beginning to change the course of his life. The next morning came with a soft drizzle that made everything outside look calm and clean. The city was quiet, the streets glistening under a gray sky. Ethan left his apartment early, a little nervous, but pretending he wasn't. He'd told himself all night that it was just coffee, a simple thank you, nothing more. Still, his stomach felt tight as he walked toward the small cafe near the school. He had even taken an extra minute getting ready, making sure his shirt was clean and his shoes weren't too scuffed. Lila noticed when he left earlier than usual. "Good luck, Dad," she said teasingly, grinning over her cereal bowl. "Luck?" he said with a chuckle. "It's just coffee." "Sure," she said, still smiling. "Just coffee." Now, as he pushed open the cafe door, the warm smell of roasted beans and baked bread surrounded him. The place was small and cozy, with wooden chairs and the quiet hum of morning chatter. He scanned the room and saw her sitting by the window, Clara Davenport. She looked different from the day before. Less like a CEO, more like a regular person. Her hair was down this time, and she was wearing a simple gray sweater. There was a gentle calmness about her that surprised him. She noticed him and waved, smiling. "You found it," she said. "Wasn't too hard," he replied, sitting across from her. For a moment there was a small silence, not awkward, just new. Then she spoke first. "I hope this isn't too strange," she said. "I just wanted to thank you properly." Ethan smiled softly. "You already did that yesterday," he said. "Then think of this as me wanting to know the man who made my daughter's night so special," she said, her voice warm. He chuckled lightly. "Well, I don't know if there's much to know. I cleaned floors and fixed lights." Her eyes softened. "And you made a young girl feel like she belonged," she said. "That's more than some people ever do." He looked down for a second, not used to being praised like that. "I didn't really plan it," he said quietly. I just saw her sitting there. Reminded me of my daughter, I guess. Sometimes all it takes is one person to notice. Clara nodded slowly, taking a sip of her coffee. You're right. Most people look, but they don't really see. They talked for a while, about Sophie, about the dance. And then about their lives. She told him about her company, how she'd taken over after her husband passed away 3 years ago. Her voice trembled slightly when she mentioned it, but she kept it steady. It was sudden, she said softly. One moment we were planning a vacation, and the next, everything changed. I had to be strong for Sophie. Ethan nodded gently. I understand, he said. I lost my wife too. Lila was just a baby then. It's strange, isn't it? How life doesn't ask if you're ready. For a moment they both sat quietly, connected by the same invisible thread of loss. Two single parents who had been doing their best for the ones they loved. Clara sighed. It's exhausting sometimes, she admitted, trying to run a company and be a good mother. There are days when I feel like I'm failing at both. Ethan smiled kindly. You're not failing. Sophie's a wonderful kid. That says a lot about you. Her eyes glistened a little and she looked away with a small laugh. You're good at saying things people need to hear, she said. He shrugged. Maybe I just try to be honest. Their conversation flowed easily after that. They talked about little things, favorite foods, childhood memories, the weather, even music. It felt surprisingly natural, like they had known each other longer than a day. When their coffee cups were empty, Clara glanced at her watch and sighed. I should get going. Meetings never end, she said. Then she looked at him and added softly, This was nice. I can't remember the last time I talked like this. Ethan smiled. Me neither. She stood, putting on her coat. Maybe we can do this again sometime? He hesitated, then nodded. Yeah, I'd like that. She gave him one last warm smile before walking out into the drizzle, leaving behind the faint scent of her perfume and a quiet feeling he couldn't quite name. That afternoon, as he went about his work at the school, Ethan found himself replaying their conversation in his mind. Not because he was thinking romantically amawe, but because it had felt real. Genuine. Two tired souls finding comfort in simple words. Later he saw Sophie in the hallway again. She waved happily when she spotted him. Mom said you had coffee, she said with a grin. Ethan laughed. She did, huh? Guess she tells you everything. She said you're very nice, Sophie added. He chuckled. Your mom gives me too much credit. Sophie tilted her head. You make people smile. That's not something everyone can do. Her words touched him more than he expected. Before he could respond, one of her classmates called her, and she waved goodbye, rolling away with the same bright energy that had filled her face at the dance. That night, after work, Ethan walked home under the streetlights. He passed the small park where he used to take Lila when she was younger. The swings creaked softly in the breeze, and for a moment he felt a mix of peace and longing. He didn't have much, a small apartment, an old car, a job that most people overlooked. But he had something he was proud of, the ability to care even when the world didn't notice. A few days later, Clara called. He was surprised when he saw her name on the screen. Hi, Mr. Cole, she said. Her voice sounded light. I hope I'm not disturbing you. Not at all, he said. Everything all right? I was wondering, she began, if you'd be willing to help with something. My company's launching a school program about kindness and inclusion. Sophie told me you have a way with students. I could use your perspective. Ethan blinked in surprise. Me? I'm not really, she interrupted gently. You don't have to be an expert, Ethan, just yourself. That's what makes it work. He thought about it for a moment. It was outside his comfort zone. He was just a janitor, not a speaker or organizer. But something about her voice, the sincerity in it, made him agree. All right, he said finally. I'll help however I can. Clara sounded genuinely pleased. Thank you. I'll send you the details. And please call me Clara. That week they met again at her company's office, a tall glass building that made him feel small at first. He wasn't used to places like that. The floors shone like mirrors and everyone wore crisp suits. But when Clara greeted him in the lobby, smiling warmly, he felt at ease. She introduced him to her team as a friend of the family. That simple phrase meant more to him than she probably realized. They spent the afternoon discussing ideas. Clara wanted to create a program where students could share stories of kindness, focusing on empathy and inclusion. Ethan suggested simple activities, things like a day in someone else's shoes, or having students volunteer together to understand teamwork and respect. Clara listened carefully, nodding at his ideas. "You really understand people," she said. "I just listen," he replied modestly. When the meeting ended, Clara offered to drive him back to the school. During the ride, they talked more about life, not just work. She asked about Lila, and he told her how his daughter wanted to be a writer someday. Clara smiled. "Sounds like she has your heart," she said. "She does," he said proudly. They stopped in front of the school gate. Before he got out, Clara turned to him. "You know," she said softly, "meeting you has reminded me that there are still good people in the world." He smiled gently. "They're everywhere," he said. "Just easy to miss sometimes." For a moment their eyes met, not in a romantic way, but in a deep, quiet understanding. Then he nodded and stepped out, waving as she drove away. That night, when he got home, Lila was sitting on the couch reading. She looked up and said, "You're smiling again." "Am I?" he asked. She nodded. "Yeah, you should do that more." He laughed softly and sat beside her. "I'll try." As they talked, his phone buzzed with a message. It was from Clara. Just a simple line. "Thank you again. Not just for the meeting, but for reminding me what kindness looks like." He stared at the message for a while, then typed back, "You're welcome. It's easy to forget sometimes, but it's still out there." He put his phone aside and looked at his daughter, who was now telling him about a story she was writing for school. Her words flowed with excitement, her hands moving as she described the characters. He smiled quietly, thinking about how strange and beautiful life could be. One dance, one small act, and now somehow their lives were connected in ways he never expected. As the night grew darker, Ethan stood by the window, watching the rain fall outside. He didn't know what the future held. Maybe this new connection with Clara and Sophie would fade with time, or maybe it would grow into something that changed everything. But one thing he did know, for the first time in a long while, he felt seen too. Not as the janitor, not as the man who cleans, but as a person who mattered, and sometimes that was all anyone needed, just one person to see them, to remind them they weren't invisible. The next week at the school felt different for Ethan. There was a quiet energy in the air, one that made the hallways feel lighter, like something had shifted overnight. He still did his usual rounds, sweeping, fixing, checking the classrooms. But now he noticed more small smiles and nods from the students. A few even waved as he passed. He wasn't sure if it was because of the dance or if the kids just recognized him more. Maybe it was a little of both. That afternoon he heard Sophie calling his name. She was waiting outside the gym with her wheelchair, her backpack slung over one shoulder. "Hi, Mr. Cole," she said, her face bright. "Mom said you'd be helping with the new program today." Ethan smiled. "Yes, I'm supposed to give some ideas and see how we can make it work." She rolled beside him, excitement bubbling in her voice. "Mom said she's counting on you." "She really likes your ideas," he chuckled. "I hope they're good enough." Sophie laughed, the sound light and genuine. "They will be. You make everything sound fun and easy." When they entered the classroom where Clara had arranged the meeting, Ethan was greeted by a small group of students and a few teachers. Posters decorated the walls with slogans about kindness, respect, and understanding. A large board in the corner had sticky notes from students who had shared stories of small acts of kindness they had done. Clara was already there, smiling warmly as Ethan arrived. She had a way of making everyone feel included, yet she looked more relaxed than she did at work. "Good to see you," she said. "Thank you for coming." "Happy to be here," Ethan replied. The first part of the meeting was simple introductions. Each student spoke about a time someone had helped them, and each teacher talked about ways they had encouraged empathy. When it was Ethan's turn, he hesitated for a moment. He wasn't used to being the center of attention. Then he spoke simply. "Kindness doesn't have to be big," he said. "It's the little things. Holding a door, listening when someone's upset, or even just smiling at someone who looks lonely. That's what matters. Those little moments can change a person's day, or even their life." A few students nodded. One girl, a quiet one sitting at the back, smiled softly. Ethan caught her glance and returned it with a small nod. The simple connection felt important, more important than he could explain. After the meeting, Clara pulled him aside. "You know," she said, "I didn't expect you to connect with the students so naturally. Most adults come in thinking they have to teach them something. You didn't," Ethan shrugged. "I just tried to see them." "That's all," Clara's eyes softened. "That's more than most people do. You've got a rare gift, Ethan. I think Sophie sees it too." He felt a small warmth spread through his chest. It wasn't something he was used to hearing, that he had a gift or that anyone noticed the way he cared. The rest of the afternoon passed quickly. Ethan helped set up stations for the students' activities, and Clara and her team prepared materials for the lessons. Every now and then Sophie would roll by, showing him a drawing or a note she had written. She was proud of the small touches they were adding, and he felt proud too. Later, as the day came to an end, Clara asked if he could stay a little longer. "There's something I want to show you," she said, her tone quiet but serious. Ethan followed her into her office, a space full of books, papers, and a few personal photos. The room felt warm despite the large windows that overlooked the city. Clara went to a cabinet and pulled out a small photo album. She handed it to him gently. "This is Sophie when she was younger," she said softly. "Before everything changed. Before her wheelchair." Ethan opened the album and began to look at the pictures. A tiny girl with a bright smile, running in a garden, hugging her mother tightly. Ethan felt a lump form in his throat. She looked so full of life, so free. "She was always strong," Clara continued. "Even when she got sick, she never lost that spark. But sometimes I worry. I worry that people only see her condition and forget everything else." Ethan nodded, understanding completely. "I know what that's like," he said quietly. "People look at what you can't do instead of what you can." Clara smiled faintly. "Exactly. And that's why what you did at the dance meant so much. You saw her. You treated her like anyone else. That's rare, Ethan. And it reminded me that there are people in this world who are still good even when everything seems hard." He felt a mix of humility and gratitude. He had never thought of himself as someone who could make a difference. Yet here she was, telling him that he had. They sat in silence for a moment, looking through the photos. Ethan felt a quiet connection growing, not just to Clara but to Sophie as well. It was strange to feel this kind of trust so quickly, but it was real. Then Clara spoke again, her voice soft. "I know it's unusual to ask, but I would like you to be part of this program, not just as a guest, but as someone who can guide it. You understand the students in a way my team can't, and honestly, I think Sophie would be happier knowing you're involved." Ethan felt his heart race. He wanted to say yes, but he worried about overstepping. He was just a janitor. Who was he to be part of something like this at a company that ran half the city's schools? Clara must have seen his hesitation. She reached out and placed a hand on the album, then on the edge of the table. "Ethan," she said gently, "I'm not asking for your resume or credentials. I'm asking for your heart. That's what matters. You already have what we need." He swallowed hard, his chest tightening. I'll do it," he said finally. Clara's face lit up with a relieved smile. "Thank you. That means more than I can say." The rest of the week passed in a blur of preparations. Ethan met with students, organized activities, and shared stories about small acts of kindness. Every day he felt more at home in the role, more confident in the impact he could make. One afternoon, as he was rolling a cart down the hallway, he heard a voice call his name. He turned to see Sophie rushing toward him, her face glowing. "Dad!" "I mean, Mr. Cole," she said quickly, laughing. "Mom said she's planning a surprise for you tomorrow." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "A surprise?" "Yes, but you can't know what it is," she said, bouncing slightly in her wheelchair. "It's a secret and it's going to be amazing." He chuckled. "All right, I'll try to wait patiently." When he got home that evening, he told Lila about Sophie's excitement. She laughed and said, "Sounds like someone's going to be very appreciated tomorrow." Ethan smiled but felt a strange nervousness in his stomach. He wasn't used to attention or recognition, and the thought of a surprise made him anxious. Yet he trusted Clara and Sophie. Somehow he knew it would be something meaningful. The next morning he arrived at the school earlier than usual. The air smelled like rain and the sky was gray but brightening. He followed the hallway to the gym where he saw Clara waiting. She smiled warmly when she saw him. "Good morning," she said softly. "I hope you're ready." Ethan nodded, a little unsure. "As ready as I can be," Clara led him inside. The gym looked different than usual. Chairs were arranged in a circle, and the students were already seated, whispering excitedly. Sophie wheeled herself to the center, her face radiant. "Everyone," Clara said, "today we're celebrating someone very special. Someone who reminds us that kindness and attention can change lives. Ethan Cole." Ethan froze, feeling the attention of dozens of eyes on him. The students clapped softly, and he felt heat rise to his cheeks. Sophie rolled closer and handed him a small handmade card. "Thank you for noticing me," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "You made me feel brave, happy, and seen. You're my hero." Ethan felt tears prick at the corners of his eyes. He tried to smile, but it shook a little. I didn't do anything special," he said quietly. "Yes, you did," Sophie said firmly. "You saw me when nobody else did. You made me feel like I mattered." Clara stepped forward, placing a hand on his shoulder. "He did," she said softly. "And that's why we wanted to honor him. Not with awards or money, but with recognition from the people whose lives he's touched. That's the truest reward." As the students clapped and cheered, Ethan felt something shift inside him. For so long he had lived quietly, unnoticed, doing the best he could for Lila. But in that moment, he realized that even small acts of kindness could ripple out in ways he never imagined. Sophie leaned close and whispered, "You're part of our family now, Mr. Cole." And for the first time in a long while, Ethan believed her. The morning sunlight filtered through the blinds, casting soft patterns on the floor of Ethan's apartment. He was awake earlier than usual, not out of obligation, but because he couldn't sleep. His thoughts kept returning to the events of the past weeks: the dance, Sophie's laughter, and the coffee with Clara. It was strange how life could shift so suddenly, how one small act could connect people in ways you never expected. Lila was still asleep, curled up under her blanket, and Ethan looked at her for a moment, smiling softly. She was his anchor, his reason for everything. Yet as much as he loved his quiet life with her, he felt a quiet curiosity about the day ahead. Clara had mentioned a special surprise, and he wasn't sure what to expect. When he arrived at the school, the gym was already buzzing with activity. Students were arranging chairs, placing handmade decorations, and whispering excitedly. Ethan followed the familiar hallway, pushing the mop bucket aside, but something felt different. Today didn't feel like work. Today felt important. Clara was there near the center of the gym, greeting students and giving small instructions. She turned when she saw him and waved with a warm smile. "Good morning," she said softly. "Are you ready for today?" "As ready as I'll ever be," he replied, his voice calm but carrying a hint of nervousness. She laughed lightly. "Don't worry. It's going to be fun." Sophie rolled forward in her wheelchair, her eyes sparkling with excitement.
"Dad, I mean—"
"Mr. Cole," she called, laughing. "Mom said you were coming. Are you ready?" "I think so," Ethan said, smiling at her enthusiasm. Clara guided him toward the center of the gym, where the students had arranged a small stage of sorts. It wasn't fancy, just a raised platform with a few chairs, but it felt special. The students gathered in a semicircle, their eyes full of curiosity and expectation. "Today," Clara began, her voice gentle but confident, "we are celebrating someone who has reminded us all about the power of kindness. Someone who has shown that even small acts can change lives." Ethan froze slightly. He wasn't used to this kind of attention. He had spent so many years quietly doing what he could, never expecting recognition. He looked around at the students, their faces bright and eager, and felt a warmth rising in his chest. Sophie rolled forward, holding a small handmade booklet. "This is for you," she said, her voice trembling slightly with excitement. "We made it together. It's all the stories of kindness that you helped inspire." Ethan accepted the booklet carefully. As he opened it, he saw drawings, letters, and small notes from students. Stories about moments when they had helped someone, comforted a friend, or simply shared a smile. Each one was accompanied by a short note saying how inspired they were by him. He blinked, feeling tears prick at the corners of his eyes. He hadn't realized the impact he had made. All he had done was see people, treat them with respect, and offer a moment of attention. And somehow that had sparked something bigger than he could have imagined. Clara stepped closer, her expression soft. "You see, Ethan, this is why your presence matters. You remind us that people notice, people care, and that ripple spreads further than you realize." He closed the booklet gently, overwhelmed by the simple truth of her words. I didn't expect any of this," he admitted softly. That's the thing about kindness, Clara said. It isn't about expectation. It's about action. And because of you, these students are learning to do the same. For a moment, the gym was quiet. Then slowly, the students began to clap. At first, it was a few polite claps, then more, until the entire room echoed with the sound of appreciation. Ethan felt heat rise to his cheeks, not from pride, but from a deep, quiet sense of fulfillment. Sophie leaned close to him, her eyes shining. "You are my hero, Mr. Cole," she whispered. "Thank you for seeing me when no one else did." Ethan took a deep breath, his voice catching slightly. "You don't need to thank me, Sophie. I just wanted you to feel happy. That's all," she smiled. "You did more than that. You showed me that people care." Clara watched silently, her own eyes glistening with emotion. She had seen many things in her life: wealth, power, influence, but what Ethan had done, simply by noticing a child and treating her with respect, had touched something deeper than anything money could buy. Later, as the celebration continued, students performed short skits and read out stories of kindness from their classmates. Each act was simple, genuine, and heartfelt. Ethan helped guide the younger students, offering gentle encouragement and quiet praise. He felt more connected to them than he had expected. At one point, a student who had been shy all year approached him. "Mr. Cole," she said softly, I tried to be kind today like you showed us. I helped someone who was alone at lunch." Ethan smiled warmly. "That's wonderful, see? Even the smallest gestures can make a big difference." She nodded, a shy smile spreading across her face before she went back to her friends. Ethan realized that these quiet moments of connection, were exactly what he had always hoped to inspire. When the celebration ended, Clara asked Ethan to stay a moment. She led him to the side where she held out a small envelope. "This is for you," she said softly. Ethan looked at it, uncertain. "I can't accept that," he said gently. "It's not about the money," Clara said quickly. "It's a token of appreciation from all of us. Just a small way to say thank you for everything you've done." He hesitated, then accepted it. The envelope felt light in his hand, but the gesture carried weight far beyond its size. "You deserve it," Clara said. "Not for the recognition, but for your heart. That's something rare." Ethan nodded quietly, feeling the warmth of her words. He wasn't used to this kind of attention, but it felt genuine, sincere, and it touched him in a way that nothing else had. As he left the school, the students waving goodbye and shouting thanks, he felt a lightness in his step. He had always thought that his life was ordinary, unnoticed, and simple. But now he realized that ordinary acts of care and attention could ripple outward in ways he never imagined. Back at home, Lila ran to greet him. "Dad, you look so happy," she exclaimed. "I had a good day," he said, smiling. "A very good day." Lila looked at him curiously. "Was it about the school program?" "Yes," he said. "But more than that, it was about people noticing each other. People caring." She nodded, her young eyes thoughtful. "That's really nice, Dad." Ethan looked out the window at the fading sunlight, thinking about how unpredictable life could be. One simple act, asking a girl to dance, noticing someone who felt invisible, had led to this moment. A moment where kindness had multiplied, connecting people across ages and experiences. Days passed and the school program continued. Ethan remained involved, helping students plan activities, guiding discussions, and encouraging them to see beyond appearances. He watched as shy students found confidence, quiet students shared their stories, and small gestures of kindness became part of the school's culture. Clara often visited, sometimes staying to help, sometimes just observing. Each time she saw Ethan interacting with the students, her admiration grew. She had met many people in her life, but few had the quiet strength and genuine heart that he carried without even realizing it. One evening, after a long day at school, Ethan returned home to find a note slipped under his apartment door. It was from Clara, simple and handwritten. "Thank you for showing me what true kindness looks like. You remind me of what's really important. Clara." He smiled softly, feeling a quiet sense of connection. It wasn't about romance, attention, or recognition. It was about trust, respect, and the simple truth that one person could make a difference in many lives. That night, as Lila slept beside him, Ethan sat by the window, looking at the stars. He thought about Sophie, her laughter, the dance, the coffee, the program, and everything in between. Life had a way of surprising you when you least expected it. One act of care could grow into something bigger than you ever imagined. He realized that his life, ordinary, quiet, unnoticed for so long, had touched others in ways he couldn't have foreseen. He had made a difference not through wealth, power, or recognition, but simply by seeing people, by caring, and by acting when it mattered most. And in that quiet, peaceful moment, Ethan felt something he hadn't felt in years: hope. Hope that small acts could change the world. Hope that kindness could ripple far beyond what anyone expected. Hope that even ordinary people, quietly living their lives, could leave a mark that mattered. He closed his eyes and whispered softly, "Thank you, not to anyone in particular, but to life itself. Because sometimes, all it took to change lives, including your own, was simply showing up, noticing someone and caring enough to act." And that simple truth, Ethan realized, was the most powerful thing in the world.